Look at the kind of shoes you are wearing, one boy shouted, and the laughter spread through the schoolyard like fire. Another added, Dubem, are those shoes or carved wood? The children roared again, pointing at him as though mocking him was the most exciting game of the morning. Fulici Dubem lowered his head. He wished the earth could open and swallow him whole. The shoes on his feet were brown, cracked and lopsided, with strings that barely held them together. To the other children, they looked like trash. But to Dubem, they were treasure, the very first pair of shoes he had ever owned. At just 13, Dubem's life had already been harder than most adults could imagine. His parents had died when he was still very small, and since then, he had lived with his uncle, Okafor, in their village of Umuola, in Enugu State. Uncle Okafor had 2 children, Chika and Obinna, both about Dubem's age. They lived comfortably compared to him. Their uniforms were always clean, their shoes polished, their bags new. But Dubem, he was treated like a servant in the house. Auntie Ngozi would shout his name from morning till night. Dubem, wash the uniforms! Dubem, sweep the compound! Dubem, go and fetch water! Now! Sometimes she sent him 3 or 4 errands at once, and if he delayed in any, she would twist his ear or hit his head with a wooden spoon. The children, Chika and Obinna, did nothing. It was Dubem who washed their uniforms, polished their shoes, even solved their homework. He was intelligent, brighter than both cousins, but his brilliance was hidden under poverty and raggedness. At school, the difference showed. His uniform was faded, torn at the sleeve. His school bag was a stitched-up rag, and until recently, his feet were always bare. He endured the pain of walking on hot dust and sharp stones every day. Still, he endured. One day, his teacher, Madame Nena, had looked at him with pity mixed with irritation. Dubem, you cannot continue like this, she said before the whole class. You must wear shoes to school. Go home and tell your uncle to buy you shoes. That evening, Dubem gathered courage. After sweeping the compound and fetching water, he approached Uncle Okafor, who was reclining on a wooden chair outside. Uncle, Dubem said softly, my teacher said I should ask you for shoes. Please, Uncle, Dubem begged. The teacher said. Before he could finish, Uncle Okafor dug into his wrapper, pulled out a crumpled 100 naira note, and threw it at him. Here! Take this money and don't disturb me again. If you complain, I will deal with you. Dubem looked at the note in his hand. He knew 100 naira could not buy shoes. Uncle, the money is too small. Uncle Okafor's brows knotted. Shoes? Are my children not wearing shoes? I am paying your school fees. Is that not enough? A hot slap landed on his cheek before the words left his mouth. Ungrateful child, Uncle thundered. When I give you something, you say thank you. Don't ever tell me something is too small again. Dubem ran into the night, holding the note, his face burning with both the slap and the shame. The next day, he searched the market from stall to stall, asking timidly if anyone sold shoes for 100 naira. The traders laughed in his face. 100 naira? Maybe you should use it to buy groundnuts instead, one woman mocked. Another man shook his head. Boy, even baby sandals are more than 100 naira. Tears stung his eyes. He sat by the corner of the market square, clutching the useless note. That was when an old woman, bent with age, but with eyes that shone like hidden wisdom, noticed him. Her name was Mama Ifeoma, known for selling second-hand goods. My son, why are you crying? She asked gently. Dubem sniffed. I want to buy shoes, but I only have 100 naira. The woman studied him, then said, If you had 150 naira, I would give you something. But, she paused, thinking. If you are willing to wait for me and help carry my load home after I finish selling, I will give you the shoes for 100 naira. Hope lit up Dubem's face. Yes, Mama. I will wait, so he waited. He helped her pack up her stall, lifted her baskets onto his head, and carried them all the way to her small mud house at the edge of the village. She smiled and handed him a pair of worn brown shoes. "They are old," she admitted, "but they will serve you well. And listen, my son. These shoes will bring you good fortune. Wear them with a clean heart." Dubium held them, as though they were made of gold. To him, they were more precious than anything he owned. That night, when he returned home with the shoes, Uncle Okafor burst into laughter. "Where did you pick up this trash?" he sneered. "I bought it in the market. Someone gave it to me," Dubem replied quietly. Chica and Obina laughed until their stomachs hurt. Auntie Ngozi shook her head. "Shoes that look like masquerade feet. Useless!" But Dubem didn't care. For the first time in his life, he had something that was his own. He cleaned the shoes, polished them as best as he could, and wore them proudly the next morning. Yet when he walked into class, the laughter began again. "Ha! See Dubam's shoes! Are those shoes or cooking pots? Dubam the masquerade?" Their mockery cut deep. At break time, Dubem couldn't bear it. He slipped away from the others and hid behind the mango tree near the school fence, hugging his knees, wishing the laughter would stop. For everyone else, the shoes were ugly. But for Dubem, they were the only gift of dignity he had ever received. He sat there in silence, not knowing that the shoes he hid in shame would soon become the key to a future no one in Umu Ola village could ever imagine. The days that followed were heavy for Dubem. Every morning, he braced himself for laughter that cut like thorns. The other pupils had turned his shoes into a daily chorus of mockery. "Dubem the masquerade! Dubem's pot shoes! Dubim, when will you buy real shoes?" He learned to keep his head down, slipping quietly through the back of the classroom after everyone had settled. It was easier than enduring their eyes. At break time, he no longer played with the other children. Instead, he hid behind the school building or under the mango tree, nibbling on roasted groundnuts if he had any, or sometimes going hungry. Even in the village, tongues wagged. Some neighbors whispered pity when they saw him trudging along in the cracked brown shoes. "Okafor is truly wicked," one woman muttered at the stream. "How can he let his brother's child suffer like this?" Another woman sighed, shaking her head. "That boy is strong." May God not forget him, others mocked with sideways glances, their hands covering smiles. The cousins, Chica and Obina, grew bolder in their scorn. They often walked ahead of him on their way to school, leaving him behind. "We can't be seen with him," Obina told Chica one day, loud enough for Dubem to hear. "People will think we are the same." So Dubem began walking alone, the dust of the village road swirling around his ankles as he trudged home under the afternoon sun. One particular day, his stomach was burning with hunger. He hadn't eaten since morning, and Auntie Ngozi's voice already echoed in his head, summoning him to more chores. As he walked, his eyes fell on something unusual, a crisp 1,000 naira note lying in the middle of the dusty path. His heart jumped. 1,000 naira? In Umu Ola village, that was no small money. He looked around. No one was in sight. His hand trembled as he bent slightly, ready to snatch it. But then he froze. In their village, it was said that picking money from the ground was an abomination, a snare of spirits that could swallow one's destiny. He could almost hear his late mother's voice whispering in his ear. "Dubem, greed is a chain that binds the soul." He hesitated, torn between hunger and fear. Finally, he spat on the ground beside the money, stepped firmly over it, and walked away quickly, his heart thudding in his chest. By the time he reached home, Auntie Ngozi's commands rained on him like arrows. "Drop your bag! Fetch water now! After that, sweep the whole compound! Don't forget to wash the uniforms before night!" His stomach twisted, but he obeyed without a word. Hours later, exhausted, he finally slipped into his small room. He pulled off his ragged uniform, dropped his school bag in the corner, and bent to remove his shoes. That was when he saw it. Inside the shoes, both of them, were wads of 1,000 naira notes. Fresh, clean, and stacked thick, as though the shoes were secret baskets of wealth. Dubium gasped, his hands shaking as he picked them up. It was the exact same kind of money he had seen on the road. He stumbled backward, almost dropping them. "What? What is this?" he whispered, his voice quivering. He quickly shoved the money back inside, dragged the shoes under his wooden bed, and sat frozen on the edge of his mat. His mind raced. Could someone have put the money there? He rushed out to the sitting room and asked his uncle carefully. "Uncle, did you misplace money?" Uncle Okafor glared at him. "Money? Do I look like a fool who drops money about? Go and continue your work." He asked his cousins too. They both laughed in his face. "If we had that kind of money," Obina sneered, "do you think we'd leave it for you?" Dubem returned to his room, his heart still pounding. He dared not touch the money. That night, sleep refused to come. He kept staring at the space beneath his bed, where the shoes lay hidden, glowing in his imagination like they carried a secret fire. The next morning, he made a decision. He left home barefoot, clutching the shoes and the hidden notes in a sack. He went straight to the market, searching for Mama Ifeoma, the old woman who had sold him the shoes. But her stall was empty. When he asked the traders, they looked at him strangely. "Mama Ifeoma! She hasn't been here in weeks," one man said. "Even her house. Nobody lives there anymore," another added. Dubem's heart sank. He hurried to the edge of the village, to the small mud house where he had carried her goods. The house stood silent, its doors locked, its compound overgrown with weeds. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. Fear wrapped itself around him like a cold cloth. He returned home, too frightened to spend the money. He tucked the notes deep inside a clay pot under his bed and avoided the shoes for the whole day. But the mystery did not end there. The following afternoon, after another long day of mockery at school, Dubem walked home barefoot again, his sack slung over his shoulder. On the road, he accidentally stepped on a small piece of roasted yam someone had dropped. Annoyed, he wiped his foot in the grass and continued. That evening, when he entered his room, his breath caught in his throat. Lying neatly beside his shoes was a pile of roasted yam, fresh, hot, and wrapped in banana leaves, enough to feed him twice over. His eyes widened. He sat down slowly, his mind spinning. The money, the food, could it be the shoes? Curiosity grew stronger than fear. The next day, he experimented. He wore the shoes again, and when he walked through the bush path, he deliberately stepped on a shiny pebble. Later that evening, inside his room, he found small golden trinkets glistening near the shoes, pieces that looked like they belonged in a king's palace. Dubem trembled, staring at them. The words of Mama Ifeoma rang in his ears. "These shoes will bring you good fortune. Wear them with a clean heart." From that day, everything changed. Quietly, secretly, Dubem began to test the shoes' powers. Each time he stepped on something, money, food, even stones, they reappeared at home beside the shoes in multiples. He never told a soul. Instead, he began to save. He hid the money in clay pots, tucked food away where only he could reach, and stored small golden items in a broken wooden box under his mat. No one knew. To the world, he was still the ragged orphan with pot shoes. To his auntie, he was still the servant boy who never rested. But in the silence of his small room, Dubem nursed a secret bigger than Umuola itself. The secret of the shoes remained with Dubem alone. For months, he wore them with pride. The laughter of classmates no longer pierced his heart. He had learned that those who mocked often mocked what they did not understand. When he walked through the dusty roads of Umuola, He held his head high. But inside the house, life grew worse. Uncle Okafor's hand grew heavier with every passing day. If water spilled, Dubem received a lash. If food was late, another slap. Auntie Ngozi complained endlessly, and Chica and Obina sneered at him without fear. Then, one evening, after a quarrel over a broken clay pot, Okafor's rage boiled over. He beat Dubem until his body throbbed, then dragged him outside the compound, flung his small bag after him, and shouted, "Leave my house! You are no longer welcome here. Let the road be your father and the night be your mother." The villagers heard the commotion. Some peeped from their windows, others whispered, but no one dared interfere. Dubem, bruised and silent, picked up his bag. Inside it were the ragged shoes, his hidden savings, and nothing more. He looked once at the compound that had never been home, then walked into the night without a word. That night was the end of his suffering in Umuola. Dubem traveled to the city, carrying only faith, his secret, and his shoes. At first, he labored in small jobs, carrying loads in the market, helping in workshops, running errands for traders. But the shoes never stopped multiplying what he stepped on. Money, food, even trinkets, they appeared faithfully when he returned home each night. Unlike many boys his age, Dubem was wise. He did not waste what came into his hands. He saved, he invested, he worked harder than anyone else, until people in the city began to notice the skinny village boy, whose fortune seemed to grow with every sunrise. By the time he turned 16, Dubem had transformed completely. He enrolled himself in a good secondary school in the city, paid his fees in full, and still had enough to start businesses. Traders who once ignored him now called him Odogwu Nwa. Wealth seemed to follow him like a shadow. At 18, he returned to Umuola. The news of his arrival spread faster than Harmattan fire. "Dubem is back! The orphan boy, Dubem!" The villagers ran to the square to see for themselves. What they saw left mouths open and hands on heads. The boy they once mocked arrived not on bare feet, but in a sleek car, the kind Umuola had never seen before. The vehicle stopped at the square, and when the door opened, Dubem stepped out. He was tall, handsome, clothed in fine wear, yet on his feet still clung the same ragged brown shoes. Behind him, another car stopped, and his driver stepped out respectfully. Yes, a driver for an 18-year-old. Children whispered. Women covered their mouths. Men shook their heads in disbelief. How can this be? How did Dubem, the orphan boy in pot shoes, become richer than men twice his age? His cousins, Chica and Obina, hid in the crowd, ashamed. Their fine uniforms of old meant nothing now. They were no better than the dust around his car. Auntie Ngozi stood trembling, unable to believe that the boy she once sent on endless errands now commanded men. But it was Uncle Okafor's face that carried the deepest shame. He pushed through the crowd, fell to his knees before Dubem, and cried out, "My son, forgive me! I was blind. I was foolish. Forgive your uncle who raised his hand against you," the crowd gasped. Never had they seen proud Okafor bow before anyone, let alone the boy he once despised. But Dubem did not answer. He looked at his uncle quietly, his expression unreadable. The same silence with which he left the house years ago was the silence with which he stood now. He neither cursed nor forgave. He simply turned his gaze to the villagers. And the villagers, who once mocked him, now raised their voices in praise. "Dubem! Odogwu, Dubem! Dubem, the blessed child! May your shoes never wear out!" They clapped, they hailed, they stretched hands for gifts. But Dubem did not throw money into the crowd. He did not scatter wealth like sand, as many expected. He remained calm, distant, dignified. For though he had riches beyond imagination, only he knew the truth. Only he and Mama Ifeoma, the mysterious woman who had vanished from the village, knew the secret of the ragged shoes that never left his feet. And so, Fulici Dubem became a living riddle. To the people of Umuola, he was the orphan who turned into a prince. To his uncle, he was a silent judgment. To the villagers, he was a wonder. But in his own heart, he was simply Dubem, the boy who chose dignity over greed, who wore his shoes with pride, and who never forgot the hand that first gave him hope. And from that day on, whenever children in Umulla laughed at someone's shoes, their mothers would hush them quickly, whispering, "Be careful. Do you not remember Dubem, the boy in the ragged shoes who became a king?"